It's time to take a ride on the Common Sense Express. Now, here's your host, a wealth of information, ladies and gentlemen, Mary Souza.
Hi, welcome to Heads Up Radio. We've got a great show today on the very hot topic of federal lands versus state ownership of the lands. And today we're going to have a guest calling in. He is Jim Chmelik, who's running for lieutenant governor here in Idaho. He'll be on the line in just a few minutes. He's going to be our expert source today because he has studied this topic in great depth, and he lists it on all of his campaign literature as his number one priority. But before we get started on our hot plate of the day, please remind your friends that if they can't listen live to our programs, there are podcasts and YouTube versions available on the website at headsupradio.com. This is Wednesday, and this is the day we do our live shows. We record our live shows, so these are call-in shows, and later today, Carmine Conti will have his call-in show at 3 o'clock. He'll talk about sports and entertainment. And Michael Loy will have his show this evening at 6, where he talks about guns and personal safety and hunting. If you have any business concerns or want to promote a group or event, I just want you to know the advertising rates on Heads Up Radio are very good. We are starting out and we need support. We need some commercials and support, and so we would appreciate any help you can give us. And you can promote your own business or group. Just call the station after the show and talk with Terry. Our number is 208-758-0546. Okay. Today, our topic is, as they say, ripped straight out of the headlines, because this is what's been all over the news the last the last many days, and it's been talked about within the political circles in Idaho for some time now. We're going to discuss the controversy at the Bundy Ranch just outside Las Vegas, Nevada, but we're going to use that as a jumping off point to get into the very, very complicated issue of federal ownership of lands that are within our state's borders and the state's possible control of those lands instead, especially in the western states. This issue goes back to the founding of the country, and the Bundy Ranch conflict in and of itself goes back more than 20 years. So there's a lot to discuss on these issues. But it all comes down to the critical question of whether the federal government should own public lands within the states or whether the states themselves should own and control those lands. Jim Chmelik, running for lieutenant governor, is really focused on this topic. He calls it his number one priority, and he's a longtime business owner in Idaho County, which is near Grangeville. It's in the Grangeville area. He's currently a county commissioner there. I met Jim about a month ago when he came to Coeur d'Alene to speak at the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee. He handed out maps of the United States showing the lands controlled by the federal government in red. And it's amazing to see this map. It's from the American Lands Council. The map is produced by them. And it is almost straight down the middle of the country, just like you drew a line right between Montana and North Dakota, and then straight down as it jogs down around those states, so that the eastern half of the United States has almost very, very little federal land. And the western United States is just painted in red because there are such huge numbers of acres that are held by the federal government. 63% of the land in Idaho is held by the federal government. And I believe Nevada has even a greater percentage. So those are huge issues for the state as we go forward, and I think it'll be very interesting to get Jim's take on this. I was very surprised at his discussion of this at the Central Committee last month, and so were many other people. He gave a very abbreviated explanation, and so hopefully today he'll have enough time to really get into the explanation of the history of this and what realistically what really can be done in Idaho and what the advantages to our state would be. So we're happy to have Jim calling in to us today, and we're going to take a quick break, get him on the line, and when we come back, we'll dive into the details of this federal land controversy. But meanwhile, please jot down our number. We'll be taking calls toward the end of the show, and we want to know what you think. So you can call us at 758-0546, or during the show when I'm talking to Jim, because we're a new station, we only have one line right now, you can email me at mary@headsupradio.com anytime during the show. All right, when we come back, we'll have Jim Chmelik on the line. You're listening to the Heads Up Radio Network.
Our coffee date today. My kids are sick again, and I have a terrible headache, and medicine just doesn't seem to help.
Seems like you guys are always sick. Have you had your house tested for mold?
Come on, Jen, you know me. I keep my house spotless. There's no mold here.
That's what I thought about our house. We had the same problems last year and called mountain mold testing. They came right out and inspected our whole house for mold.
Really? What happened?
Well, mountain mold testing took air samples, and the lab test showed that we were breathing dangerous, invisible mold. We got the mold cleaned up, and now we don't have any more wheezing, headaches, or congestion. They gave us our health back.
Mold can cause numerous health problems, including allergies, chronic headaches, asthma, and lung infections. Children, pregnant women, and the elderly are especially susceptible. Call Mountain Mold Testing at 208-660-8877. That's 208-660-8877. Online at mountainmoldtesting.com.
Looking for something different to do tonight? Thinking of a restaurant that you haven't been to for a while, or a place to take the kids out for a fun night? Ever find yourself in this situation? This is a question that prompted publisher Jeanette Dunn to create Idaho Cuisine and Spokane Sizzle Dining and Entertainment Guides. And it just keeps getting better with their pocket guides, online editions, and now online local restaurant finder at sizzlingcuisine.com. Also find local wineries, breweries, distilleries, great recipes from local chefs, hot spots and cool happenings, and chances to vote for your favorites. Be in the know about local happenings when you sign up for the Sizzling Cuisine e-News, delivered to your desktop weekly, and be eligible to win a free dinner for two. You've always enjoyed reading the magazine. Now it's easy to flip through them online too. Makes it easy to find restaurants that offer great menus prepared by experienced staff who really care to serve you the best in local cuisine. Spokane Sizzle and Idaho Cuisine are online at sizzleincuisine.com. We do the footwork to make it easy for you to find just what you're looking for. Jump aboard the Common Sense Express. Now here's your host, Mary Souza.
Hi, welcome back. We are setting up this great show today to talk about a very hot topic here in Idaho and all of the western states, and that is the federal control of huge portions of land within our state. And today we have a special guest who's on the line from Idaho County to talk to us about this issue. It's something that he's really done a lot of research on. I've already told you that he is Jim Chmelik, and he is running for Lieutenant Governor of Idaho. This is what he calls his number one priority, is this federal lands issue. And Jim, I'm so glad to have you on the phone. Thank you so much for calling with us.
Well, Mary, thank you for having me on the air, and just let me know what do you want to know about the federal lands. I mean, I've spoken about this for over 12 years now, and I've done it for the last 3 years as a county commissioner. And it's just something that has to happen if we want to have a vibrant economy here in the state of Idaho.
Yes, Jim, but don't you think that this is such a timely topic right now with all the controversy about the Bundy Ranch and issue in Nevada, and now today there's this whole issue with Texas and some private land in Texas. So the overreach of the federal government into the rights of citizens is my theme in my campaign for Senate here, and I just really believe that these kinds of things are infringing on us and have been for a long time, but it's coming to the fore in everyone's mind right now. Can you give us some background on the history of this issue? Because some people are saying it goes all the way back to the founders.
It does. A lot of people don't understand how the federal government came to into possession of land, and that there were stipulations on that land when it was bought into granted to the land and ceded to the federal, at the time what was called the Continental Congress, because it was the 13 colonies who were fighting the Revolutionary War, and the colonies had ran out of money to fight the war. 7 of the colonies owned land. Those 7 colonies said, look, we'll simply start selling some of what we call our western wastelands, and that was everything west of their western borders to the Mississippi River. The other 6 colonies said, well, that wouldn't be fair because we'll have to tax our citizens, and that's what we're fighting a war about here, and, you guys have this available to you. We don't have that. They'll simply vote with their feet and move to your states, and in our states, in our provinces, our colonies, will cease to exist. Mm-hmm. So for the good of the war, the good of the battle, to help finance Revolutionary War, these 7 colonies agreed to cede their land to the Continental Congress. But when they did that, they put stipulations on it. They said the only thing you can do is with this land is to pay the debt off for the good of the entire nation as you create new and separate independent sovereign states. And they need to be brought on the same equal footing as the original 13 colonies. So while when a new state was created, the federal government did own the land. They also agreed in the enabling documents to dispose of this land, and those lands that remained unsold for a certain period of time would then just be completely relinquished to the states, and the states would have those lands. And that's how our Constitution got to be written pertaining to disposal of land. And the argument centers around a part of the Constitution that people don't understand how it was written, and that's Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. And we've constructed an argument around Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, and the original Sagebrush Rebellion, this because people have been trying to compare it to that, only centered their argument around Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, which explains what the federal government's allowed to own. And if it doesn't fit that, the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C., and the ports, shipyards, docks, and magazines, and other needful buildings, then they have a duty to dispose of any land. Whether it's any land they come into possession of in the future, which was what created most of the western states through the Louisiana Purchase. So it's an argument that's also found a lot of founding with legal scholars across the country. The American Federalist Society has said these guys have done their homework. The Michigan Environmental Law Review Team has said these guys have done their homework. 6 AGs in the West now have said this looks like this is a constitutional argument that needs to be made. And it's been done before. There was the original, what they called at the time, the Western states: Florida, Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, Missouri, Louisiana, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, were all as much as 90% federally owned. And guess what? The Congress was not disposing of the land as promised. And they had to petition Congress. And there was one senator from Missouri, Thomas Hart Benton, who found himself doing battle for this system, who continually went back year after year after year, educating his constituents, educating people around the country about this issue, and educating his colleagues in the Senate and the House, to the point where 27 years after they started this, they said, you know what? You guys are right. And they started disposing of the land like they were supposed to. That's it in a nutshell. So you see, it's been done before. But we've got to know what our history is. We've got to band together in the West. And we've also got to band together with the rest of the states in this country and show them. Right. Recently, South Carolina also passed a resolution saying that the lands of the West need to be disposed to the states in the West. It's only fair. Other states are looking at that. That's what I'd like to be able to do as a lieutenant governor, is to travel around and talk to these other states and explain to them why this should happen, why it's constitutional, and make those arguments. We've done it as a county commissioner, and we've been very successful across the state in explaining this argument So successful that we even got our own state to pass a resolution. We got them to put together an interim study committee to study what the transfer of public lands could look like. I was able to take those two resolutions and get a resolution passed at the Idaho Association of Counties with over 70 to 75% of all the elected officials in the state of Idaho at the county level to support this. Through the efforts of mine and many, many other people across the West, I want to believe it was a representative, a committee woman out of Wyoming, took this to the Republican National Committee, and guess what? The Republican National Committee passed a resolution.
Great.
Our state farm bureau has passed a resolution, has many other state farm bureaus across the West, and this will be at the state, I believe it was at the state convention this year. I don't know if it passed or not. I haven't had time to check on that. But we're gaining momentum all across the West in the country on this issue.
Hey, Jim, let me just ask you a clarification question, because I know you understand this in depth, but a lot of us are not as educated on the details. When you say that the federal government had a responsibility to dispose of the lands, what do you mean by dispose?
Okay, the federal government, there's an interesting thing that goes with these lands. When the original 7 colonies disposed of the land, ceded the land to the Continental Congress, everybody agreed that the land, when you created new states, you had to dispose of the land, but the disposal means sale. And you had to sell the land to pay the debt, and 95% of the purchase price goes to retire the federal debt, and 5% goes to fund education in the state where you were doing that. That would be carried on for a certain amount of years, and when the lands no longer failed to sell at a brisk pace, then the remaining refuse of those lands would just be disposed back to the states, and the states would now be in charge of those lands, and the machinery, the land machinery of the federal government would be completely removed. And this is true today. Today, the federal government at any time can start selling these lands off, and I promise you, it's constitutional, and there's nothing we can do about it. That's one of my greatest fears in the West, is watching them to start, if they were to start selling these lands off. What we have proposed, one of the things I have proposed, is we're way beyond the idea of disposing the lands of the federal government. I say give these lands back to the states, but there's still the responsibility to pay that debt off.
Right.
We could create a business model of managing those lands to our benefit, to still fund our local governments, fund our education, take care of the sick and the elderly in our states, and put a lot of people back to work and broaden our tax base. You'd even be able to lower our taxes with the model you could do with this. But at the same time, we need to take some of the receipts from the sale of timber, from mining, from grazing, and all these things that go with it, and start paying off our share of the debt, which we have 1.6 million people. Once we've achieved that, then that land is completely, we get complete title to that land as a state, and then we can have a discussion inside this state as far as what we want to do with this land. I personally have come to understand very well that there's public access. People want to maintain the public access issues. I support them on that. You also have grazing rights that are on this land. You also have stock water rights that are on this land. Those rights need to be maintained while at the same time providing the access for the people who like to hunt and fish and berry pick and hike and ski and snowmobile and everything else that we've come accustomed to in the West. But my point is, let's have that debate here in Boise, not 2,800 miles away if you're trying to sell our land. Let's have Idahoans decide what Idahoans want to do with their land.
Is there a possibility legally, because you said that the federal government constitutionally could start selling off Western lands, could they use Western lands as collateral against some of the enormous borrowing that they're doing?
I don't know that they're using Western lands as collateral. I've never seen that. I've heard people talk about it. One thing you have to understand: most of our debt is held by a large percentage is held actually by the people of the United States. About 60% of our debt's held by us. We've rated the Social Security funds, we've rated Medicare funds, we've rated Medicaid funds. That's why they're called unfunded liabilities. There's total $125 million. So I don't know that's the major issue right now. What I'm trying to say is we've got this available to us. and we can get ourselves out of the debt we're in, and we can fund these things with the trillions of dollars. Just in coal and natural gas and oil, you're talking $151 trillion in recoverable oil, natural gas, and coal. And the GAO actually thinks there's 3 times that amount there, but we only have the technology to get to 1/3 of it. So these numbers we're talking about are astronomical. And not only that, but the things that could put us back to put our populations back to work. And we wouldn't have to even worry about minimum wage laws, because these jobs we're talking pay way above minimum wage. So as far as collateral, I don't see that right now. I know that it did happen in Ecuador. China put a call on debt and forced Ecuador to sell some of their public lands. I don't know, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't, the article, the one I read, I didn't, it wasn't sure that it was sold to China. I know they were just forced to sell it to pay debt off with China. So maybe they sold it internally to people inside the country. I'm not sure about that. I haven't heard that China actually took possession of any property in Ecuador. But that's the situation they were in. Mm-hmm. And we can't keep doing what we're doing in this country. We're $17.5 trillion in debt, growing it every day. We show no propensity for slowing down or of actually cutting spending. Yes, we've cut the rate of growth as far as our spending goes, but we haven't done the actual cutting of spending. That's a farce when people say that.
Right.
And Idaho collects 36% of its budget from the federal government. That's all. Those are all borrowed funds.
And that makes us very vulnerable, because as we found out when the Idaho Education Network was suddenly short $14 million that the federal government was supposed to be giving it earlier this year, they suddenly just couldn't come up with the money. We're just very vulnerable if we depend on the federal government for 36% of our budget, our state budget, because the federal government has no money. I have a question for you that someone emailed to me about Senator Crapo and Senator Risch from Idaho, who are saying that this whole conversation about, or who have in the past said the conversation about federal lands is not going to go anywhere in Idaho, because Idaho is part of the Louisiana Purchase and thereby doesn't qualify for the same status as some of the other states. Is that true? And what do you know about that?
No, that's not true at all, because the Constitution is still the Constitution. It lays out what the federal government, a land it's allowed to own, and it has a duty to dispose of. It doesn't matter how or when they came into possession of that land, and that's an argument, that's a debate I think we need to have. And the legal scholars, like I said, the Federalist Society, the Michigan Environmental Law Review Team, are stepping up and saying, yes, this is the Constitution. Okay, you don't just throw it out. You just don't throw it out for one part of the country. That to me is just not a very good argument. I think we just need to get Senator Crapo and Senator Risch educated with the right people. Again, I'm making an argument. I'm not a lawyer, but that's the great thing about our Constitution. Our Constitution wasn't written by a bunch of lawyers. The debates that took place over Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, you have to go read those and see exactly what they said and how specific the seating language was from the colonies of Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina and Maryland and New York and Virginia and Massachusetts, and what they said concerning that land. Why would that change? Because you're still creating states.
Right.
Because we expand our union and the federal government is the one that can go out and buy the land, does that change the Constitution? I don't think so. So, no, I don't agree with that, with the premise of that argument. And we need to be engaging in the arena of ideas here and making our arguments and constructing them from a legal position, like we have done with this position here surrounding Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2. Mm-hmm. Now, if they don't want to fight, that's their prerogative. I personally am willing to fight for this. Because how can you have states equal, separate, and independent sovereign as the original 13 if we don't own our land?
Exactly. And I agree with you.
Are we going to have two countries?
No, we can't. We can't. And the East,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, and of course, the founders were not lawyers because the Constitution is actually a small document that's understandable, and it's not 2,000 pages. However, speaking of lawyers, last weekend at the Lincoln Day dinner, and I know you were there as well, I had a chance to talk to Chris Troupis, who is a lawyer and is running for Attorney General. And so I posed some of these questions to him, and he said, absolutely, we have a very strong leg to stand on when it comes to exerting our states' rights for these lands. He said, there is a clear path to winning this argument. And what's interesting is our current Attorney General had recently been quoted in the local paper here, the Coeur d'Alene Press, saying that no, legally we can't do this. It's not possible. And yet, Mr. Troupis said yes, and he apparently has won in court on constitutional issues against the Attorney General more than a couple of times. So I think that he agrees directly with you that there is a very strong position constitutionally for Idaho to be stepping up and asking for these lands.
Oh, most definitely. I've discussed this with Chris Troupis, and I've discussed this with the Attorney General, and the Attorney General doesn't see it, doesn't want to make the argument, and I don't know why. I don't know why he's willing not to fight. He must believe in having a large central government. And, and that's okay. Let's have that debate, though. I disagree with that. Chris disagrees with that. And Chris Troupis has beaten this Attorney General 4 times on constitutional issues. And this Attorney General also had someone on his staff write an opinion that was going to file an amicus brief with those states fighting against Heller in the Heller case in Washington, D.C., and in that amicus brief they filed, they said they can find no constitutional right for individuals to bear arms. Now, he called that a mistake, but he never really corrected it. He never really came out. It took the NRA finding this amicus brief filed from Idaho to even get him to correct it.
Wow.
So that might give a little bit of insight of where this Attorney General is. And this Attorney General is fully supported by the current administration that's in place.
Yes,
so if they want to call that a mistake, okay, fine, it's a mistake, but you should have done a much better job of trying to correct that mistake.
There is another question that I got from an email from a reader. What happened, and I tried to send this to you earlier this morning, a copy of it, but our emails didn't connect here. It was my newsletter that I sent out yesterday on this topic, and then prompting people to remember that this show today was coming up and that you would be my guest. So I received back an email, a very emotional and strong email, not angry and not in disrespectful at all, from a reader who's a retired Forest Service person here in Idaho. And he argues that the eastern lands were given to given to private people by the British, the French, and the Spanish as they were colonized. And for that reason, the eastern lands were in private ownership. And over the years, the many, many years, those lands were actually abused and misused by private ownership, to the point that they were no longer functional, weren't even farmable, and then many of those lands have been given back to the federal government because the individuals didn't want them anymore. They didn't want the responsibility for them. And his contention as a former Forest Service person is that even though he does not like the way the forests have been managed in the last years, he thinks that they should continue in federal ownership because he's afraid that the states would sell them off to private entities. What's your response to that kind of thing?
Well, first of all, go back to the East Coast and let's take a look at the lands he's talking about. Mm-hmm. Some of the most beautiful farmland I know is in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, Kentucky, Mississippi. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And the land's not abused. Why would a private landowner who makes his living off the land abuse them? These arguments to me, you need to go back and really do your research. I've been in places in New Jersey that are state-owned parks that are some of the most pristine, beautiful places in the country. I've been on private mountains in the upper Adirondacks and throughout New Jersey and parts of Pennsylvania. These are privately owned. They're sanctuaries, for crying out loud. Because people know if they don't take care of their land, that's where their value is. Now, there are some people that abuse it, yeah. And what happens? Somebody comes in, they buy the land at a good price, then they manicure it and they bring it back to where it should be. But, you know, for the most part, I trust people. Here's the deal. Bring the land back into the state of Idaho. You want to start trying to sell that land, go for it. I'll sit back and watch that one because I don't think it'll happen. First of all, it's an extremely, extremely tough process to sell land in the state of Idaho. And not only that, you're going to have a lot of people fired up about that. Good luck with that one. I'm not proposing that.
No.
I see the fear, but let's have that debate here in Boise. Let's not have that debate 2,800 miles away because remember, at any time, the federal government can sell this land to the highest bidder.
That's a scary thought, especially and let's transition into what they're trying to do down in Texas and what they did. I understand that there are people on both sides of this Bundy Ranch issue because he did have outstanding debts of a serious nature to the federal government for grazing fees, but still, his contention, I think, underneath it all is, and not just Bundy's, but a lot of his neighbors and the people that ranch down in that part of the country, is that the BLM, the federal government, should not be coming in and making all these regulations. It should be their state. The state should have control.
Well, the state would have control if it was transferred to them. But one thing the Bundys are getting wrong is that the federal government, they enabled the states, and they do own the land, but they have the duty to dispose of the land. There's many that are going to disagree with me on this, and I don't know what to do about it because the legal argument we've constructed surrounds around that of all the research we've done. You can say it's held in trust for the state to dispose of. That's fine, but technically they do own it. And the BLM was actually set to help them manage the land with them, so a working partnership. We've gotten away from this working partnership. And it's a real shame. That's not what the BLM is doing down in Nevada. And the BLM to draw guns on American citizens.
Yes.
To me, I mean that's why those people showed up down there. I don't think if the BLM hadn't been the first one to draw the guns, I don't think you see the militia show up. But that's exactly why our Second Amendment exists from a tyrannical government. And I think the BLM made a grave mistake. And then Harry Reid's comment, domestic terrorism. Really? A domestic terrorist, the guy who was out in Indiana, Ohio, who was shooting people's cars in the hillside, that's a domestic terrorist. Harry Reid is also in his state. He's not working for the citizens of his state. I'm not comprehending this. And I would also say this. If we really want to change this, we need to change our representation of the people who are representing us.
Yes.
I applaud those people that showed up and went down to Nevada. I think that was a noble thing to do. As a matter of fact, I'm being invited to go down there right now, and if we can make it all work out, I am going to go down there and be on a couple radio shows. I've been invited to do this. But I want to point out to these people, also, I have another question. What are you doing to get those people who will do the opposite of what's going on in Washington, D.C., the opposite of what people are saying in the state of Idaho, in the state of Utah, in the state of Wyoming, in the state of Montana? Are you going door to door? Are you getting on the phone? Are you making donations to candidates who really want to make a difference? If every conservative in this state who really believes in trying to make a change here were to just give, I mean, we're talking 50, 60,000 people here. If they each gave $5 to the guys who are running for these constitutional officers against the current crop we have in Boise,
yes,
we'd each have about $250,000 to message with.
I agree.
That's $2 a day for 1 month. And so we need to start redirecting some of our efforts and understand this is a game we have to constantly be in. I have been doing this for over 12 years now in the state of Idaho, and it took 12 years to get to where I think we actually knocked the brick out of the wall, or at least knocked one loose.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do. That's the process. We were given our founding fathers didn't have a process to work inside. That's why you had a Revolutionary War. We don't have to pull guns if we get the right representation. And I want to work through that process, because that's our Constitution. That's our Declaration of Independence. That's who we are as a nation. We shouldn't be warring amongst ourselves with guns. We should be having a battle of ideology, a battle of in the arena of ideas, and we need to get out there and work our tails off to say we've got something different. And here's the good news. I believe there's more people. There's a majority of people who think the exact same way that those people who got in their cars and drove down to Nevada. And God bless them for doing that. God bless them. Like I said, I've been invited to go down. If we can make it work, I'm going to go down too.
Yeah.
But there's more to this battle than just standing on a battle line. It's a continual battle every single day to be fought every day. And I hate to say this, until you die. Okay, until until your old age. Okay, if you make it that far.
Well, absolutely. And that's why it is so important for people to get tuned in to this argument and the others that are concerning the overreach of the federal government, because the Western states are banding together now in response to many of the things that are going on. And they just had this conference this last weekend, the Western lawmakers, over the federal lands issue and they gathered in Utah to talk about it. And these are the leaders of the states. It was all of the 10 it was all of the Western states except Colorado and California got together in Utah to talk about this very thing. I would imagine that you would agree that there's probably more strength in numbers, and if all the Western states come together on this issue, their argument is going to be held much more seriously with the federal government. Would you say, Jim?
Oh, most definitely, and I definitely want to applaud Speaker Becky. He was one of the people key in putting this. Was the Speaker of our House from here in Idaho. Was one of the key people getting in contact with Representative Ivey from Utah and facilitating this meeting. And I applaud him for those efforts.
Yes.
Those are the type of things. And Chairman Winder, who's sitting on the interim committee, also went down there, and so did Senator Davis. So I applaud them for engaging in this battle, and I hope they come back with the perspective that this is something that we can do, and we need to move forward on this issue.
And one of the things that gave me great confidence in this is when the Western lawmakers got together. You know, with the Bundy Ranch issue, it appeared to many people to be a ragtag group of patriot kinds of people who I admire very much, but who are reacting to the whole guns issue, and yet maybe not such a serious lawmaking group that has the ability to change the laws. But the governor of Nevada and one of the state senators in Nevada, I believe, came out and spoke in support of this group that was gathering on the ranch and the overreach of the federal government. And when you look at this gathering of the Western lawmakers in Utah, it is the state leaders, and they're talking, the state senators and the speakers of the House. And in Montana, one of the Montana senators went to the Utah gathering and came back, and Senator Jennifer Fielder from Montana and the Speaker of the House and the state majority leader, they're definitely on board with this, as are many of the Western governors. So this is not just a fringe group that is bringing these ideas forward as something that actually can be done. These are prominent lawmakers within their states who all see the logic of your argument, Jim, and what really can be taken forward. So I think that the time could be ripe for getting this done.
Oh, and I agree with you. And I'll tell you some other really good news. You know, I know a group of people that went down to the Nevada thing, and now they're trying to organize a huge rally in Riggins they're calling it Occupy the River. And they've contacted me and they said, Jim, we want to have a nice, peaceful, and this is the way you do this. This is what I was trying to explain to them. Mm-hmm. While they were down there in Nevada with they recognize, we have an opportunity here to facilitate some real change if we'll get engaged in the game. And so they're not going to show up with guns. They're going to show up with cameras. They're going to show up with video. And they want to get 500 to 1,000 people rallied up in Riggins to make it an Occupy the River Day. get some press on the coverage, and show that we can peacefully assemble, petition our government for a redress of grievances, and that we have a right to do that. And so we're trying to work through this with the BLM right now and the other agencies that need to be involved in this. We'll see where it goes, because I don't know. I've been in contact with the BLM. I haven't quite. They seem to be moving the right way, but I don't know. And these people say they're going to show up no matter what. And I'm trying to work with some private landowners down there, maybe, and try and facilitate an area for them to be camping at. But this is how you do it. And now engaging in this process to make your point is the way to do it. So that's the other thing these groups have got to recognize. It's nice to show up and do what you did, but now what are you going to do after that? Mm-hmm. You see, the left, the opposition we deal with never goes away. They're relentless. I got news for you. We're engaged in a battle that goes back to the dawn of time, and we have to be just as relentless. And if you want to assure the destiny and provide for the children of the future, for your children and their grandchildren, this is a process that is continually to be engaged in and to not go away. And let's get the right representation. Let's change the representation. Change it at the local level. Change it at the state level. Change it at the federal level. But most importantly, out of all those things I just said, the local and the state level are the most important. When you have that representation standing up against the federal government,
yes,
we have that right. And when we band together, we can do most anything we want to do.
Yes. And Jim, let me just remind our listeners that we're talking to Jim Chmelik, who is running for lieutenant governor here in Idaho. And I'm really surprised, Jim, that we don't have, I would think that the liberal side of, especially in Idaho, because we have such issues or such discussions, heated discussions about education and how to fund education, I would think that many, many people from the moderate and liberal side would be very interested in the state controlling these lands, because they can still have environmental controls or some decision making over what happens to these state lands, but the resources and the proceeds from the leases or the use of some of the natural resources would come back to help fund the schools. This does not have to be a right or left, Republican, Democrat. This could be Idahoans just wanting to use the state lands and care for the state lands on our own as a state and not have the federal government interfering. Do you think that there's a possibility they could see this and work with us on this?
Mary, you nailed it. This should cross party lines. We're talking about our state. We're talking about our independence. We're talking about funding education. We're talking about broadening a tax base, and not only that, broadening a tax base, but at the same time being able to lower taxes across the board, but still receive more revenue in for funding of education, building of new schools, taking care of our sick and our elderly people in the state and those poor people who do need help. It's a phenomenal opportunity. Why it wouldn't cross party lines? It should. That shouldn't even be part of the debate. What should be part of the debate is it seems that those on the left and we on the right want the same things. It's just how do we get there?
Exactly.
So here's a chance for us to work together, if you ask me. This is a golden opportunity for us to work together.
And it also, as I was mentioning in my newsletter yesterday, I think that if we were able to bring down the tax burden by the use of the natural resources, the careful and responsible use of the natural resources in our state, managed use, that we could bring down the burden on the taxpayers. You're a small business owner. I'm a small business owner. We know that as businesses become more and more burdened with the taxes, the city taxes, local, county, and state, and the educational taxes, we have much, much less to expand our business and to add jobs. And in Idaho, with we have the highest level of minimum wage jobs per capita in the country. We desperately need good jobs for our people. This could all work together in an equation that would be beneficial. It would be a win-win for the people of Idaho. We could lower the tax burdens that would attract more businesses into Idaho, bringing more jobs, and that would offer our citizens a lot more option, a lot more choices.
I totally agree with you, Mary. The opportunity is there. It's phenomenal. It unleashes the creative genius of our citizenry, who I've always said, while we have all these natural resources around us and they're abundant, the most abundant natural resource we have and the ultimate natural resource we have is our people.
Yes.
And we need to get them back to work. And this provides us with that opportunity. Our people are just full of ideas and ways to do things. We got to get our government out of the way. The proper role of government is to allow people to be the best they can be, not restrictive. And we've been restricting our people from everything we've been doing, and especially what I see coming down the pike now with healthcare and its education process where we're now debating in. These aren't things that expand potential for people. These are things that limit potential for people.
Yes.
And that's not the proper role of government.
No, and those are my primary examples of the overreach of the federal government into our lives, because our limitations now in healthcare are every single day. In fact, I was speaking with our doctor yesterday, and he was so frustrated because he said people do not understand the ramifications of the plans that are available through the state exchange, which is really Obamacare. Because in Idaho it goes directly into the federal exchange. And he said once all of the information comes out and they realize what has happened, they are going to be furious because they are very limited in the kind of care that they can get. And the same with Common Core in the schools. So the federal lands is an issue that we can really focus on and bring our legal minds to bear on it. Jim, I'm speaking with Jim Chmelik, who's running for lieutenant governor in Idaho, and this is the Common Sense Express. We need some common sense here. We need some common sense about what the next step going forward is, Jim. What's your advice on that?
Well, the next step going forward is I want to see, after this interim study committee from our state finishes doing what they're doing, I am praying to God they propose legislation to follow Utah's lead. I also want to see us file an amicus brief with Utah and be in position to do that when Utah files suit. I want to see us do the same thing Utah has done. They've set aside $2 million to put together their case. I think we need to do the same thing. We hear all the time about how governments need to invest. Okay, let's use the language of what the officials like to say. I think governments just spend money, but how about making an investment of $2 million into following the same suit as Utah? Mm-hmm. When we band together, when we show we're serious about these things, we can accomplish great things. So I'm praying that's what happens. That's one of the reasons why I'm in this race, why I want to be lieutenant governor, is to make sure those things happen next session and to be in there, be able to lobby from that position rather than the position of a county commissioner. That's where we have to go. And we have to keep educating people, too. We can never stop educating people. Every opportunity I get to do a presentation on public lands, I do. Every opportunity I get to talk to somebody about public lands, I do. It's what we have to do, and it's getting people educated up to the point where they know this, as well as they know the roads where they live in their neighborhoods. Yes. That's what we have to do. We've got to educate people, give them the knowledge, and then tell them you have to have the courage to go stand up for what you believe in. And with knowledge and courage, we can do this, Mary. We really, really can. And look at the people across the West. You mentioned some great names here. Jennifer Fielder. You have Demar Dahl and Grant Gerber down in Nevada. You have Ken Ivory and several other county commissioners I can't even mention off the top of my head. And all the support we've gotten here in Idaho with the Idaho Association of Counties passing that resolution. Similar things are happening all across the West. And so people are willing to stand up. We just need to be consistent in what we do and then not back away from our arguments. That's something we've had a hard time doing. We'll get attacked and then we'll go, oh, well, maybe that's a good point. No, that's just their argument back to us. We have to make it right back just as strong and never back down from the battle. Well, I think it was, I can't think of the quote off my top of my head, but I think it was Teddy Roosevelt talked about being in the arena and doing battle, and who winds up standing is the man who engages in the fight and engages in the battle. Right. And that's what we have to do in the arena of ideas, and not be afraid to put forth and stand for something. If you really want to redistribute wealth, if you really want to see people be the best way they can do, let the free market and the free enterprise system do it. It's the best system that ever works. And even with all the hamstringing that goes on in this country with fiscatory regulations, overtaxation from federal and state levels, guess what? When you add up all of the contributions and donations from all the other countries around the world, they still don't total what the United States gives. It's an amazing system. I tell people I highly recommend it. If you really want to be prosperous, let us prosper. Let us keep the fruits of our labor. Let the free market, let the free enterprise system work. Let's get out there and educate people. It's what we have to do, Mary.
Jim, you have said it so well, and thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your vast information on this with us. We've gotten a great education today, and this show will repeat over and over again as we go through the couple of weeks now before the primaries. I really wish you the best of luck on your campaign, and I appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and God bless. You have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you. All right. We will go to a break, and we'll come back and see if we can pull some pieces together and talk about what Jim Chmelik, our candidate for lieutenant governor here in Idaho, just told us. And you are listening to the Common Sense Express on the Heads Up Radio Network.
To our coffee date today. My kids are sick again, and I have a terrible headache, and medicine just doesn't seem to help.
Seems like you guys are always sick. Have you had your house tested for mold?
Come on, Jen, you know me. I keep my house spotless. There's no mold here.
That's what I thought about our house. We had the same problems last year and called mountain mold testing. They came right out and inspected our whole house for mold.
Really? What happened?
Well, mountain mold testing took air samples, and the lab test showed that we were breathing dangerous, invisible mold. We got the mold cleaned up, and now we don't have any more wheezing, headaches, or congestion. They gave us our health back.
Mold can cause numerous health problems, including allergies, chronic headaches, asthma, and lung infections. Children, pregnant women, and the elderly are especially susceptible. Call Mountain Mold Testing at 208-660-8877. That's 208-660-8877. Online at mountainmoldtesting.com.
Looking for something different to do tonight? Thinking of a restaurant that you haven't been to for a while, or a place to take the kids out for a fun night? Ever find yourself in this situation? This is a question that prompted publisher Jeanette Dunn to create Idaho Cuisine and Spokane Sizzle Dining and Entertainment Guides. And it just keeps getting better with their pocket guides, online editions, and now online local restaurant finder at sizzlingcuisine.com. Also find local wineries, breweries, distilleries, great recipes from local chefs, hot spots and cool happenings, and chances to vote for your favorites. Be in the know about local happenings when you sign up for the Sizzling Cuisine e-News, delivered to your desktop weekly, and be eligible to win a free dinner for two. You've always enjoyed reading the magazines. Now it's easy to flip through them online too. Makes it easy to find restaurants that offer great menus prepared by experienced staff who really care to serve you the best in local cuisine. Spokane Sizzle and Idaho Cuisine are online at sizzleincuisine.com. We do the footwork to make it easy for you to find just what you're looking for. Jump aboard the Common Sense Express. Now here's your host, Mary Souza.
Hi, welcome back. We've had just an incredibly interesting time today talking with Jim Chmelik, who's running for lieutenant governor here in Idaho and is an expert on the federal lands versus state lands issue. Jim has gone into great historic detail and inspired me, actually, about this issue. I am really appreciating the time that he gave us to go through the history of the constitutional connections to how the original colonies set this up with this federal, the Constitutional Congress at the time, and how those rules still apply as we're talking about even the new states as we were all added into to our country's ownership. But as we go forward, there is a big movement now to bring the Western states forward together as a team. And I told you that, and Jim was talking about this, that the Western lawmakers gathered recently, just a few days ago, in Utah to talk about the federal takeover of the lands that have been in federal control since the beginning. And now all of these Western states, which have huge portions of their lands, 50-60% or more, many of them, are controlled by the federal government. Can the states take back their land into state ownership and manage those lands better than the federal government is? First of all, it's right that the states should control their own lands. But secondly, here's the subject. Can the states do a better job? I have an email from a gentleman who's a retired Forest Service person, and he says in his email he's very against private ownership of these lands, selling off the lands, and I have not heard of anyone, and certainly Jim Chmelik wasn't advocating it either. I have not heard of anyone suggesting that we should sell the lands to private parties, but the state should be in control of it. The issue is money, and even this gentleman who's retired Forest Service told me that he can understand the desire by the states because of the enormous reduction in timber sales in the national forest over the last 2 decades. He said what used to be somewhat managed in the east and the national forests are still doesn't appear to be happening very much anymore, and especially not in the West. So he says that even the retired Forest Service people realize that the management of the national forest has not been at a quality level for some time, for a couple of decades. Montana, even the liberal Democrat governor of Montana has said that the wildlife habitat in Montana has been degraded, that the watersheds are at extreme risk, endangering key fisheries and clean water, that fire danger is off the charts, he says, and threatening local communities and stifling recreation, to say nothing of the economies of our rural communities. So the governor of Montana is all in favor of taking these states back, the lands back to the state and having the state manage them. Montana only has 28.9% of the land in Montana controlled by the federal government, and they think that's a tremendous amount of their state. They want that land back. But the percentage of land, federally controlled land in Idaho is 63%. So we have just an enormous part of our state that is controlled by the federal government. And we should have, as a state, we should have direct accountability and decision making. And in fact, that is probably the most important part of this whole conversation, is the control at the state level will give us a model that works, because we can have a clarity of purpose ourselves, we can have the discussion in our own state house, and we can be accountable for the management of those lands. If there's a problem, the people in Idaho can come forward to the state government and say, this isn't working, we need to change this system, and then you've got the accountability where your vote really counts. So that's really what I believe we should focus on. I really appreciate Jim Chmelik, our candidate for lieutenant governor here in Idaho, coming on our show today and giving us so much of his time to explain the background that he understands so well. So I usually leave you with a quote, and I will do so today. But this quote is from Jim Chmelik himself, from his literature, and he says, "When the reward is great, The effort to succeed is great, but when the government takes away all reward, no one will try or want to succeed. We get the government we tolerate. I'm Mary Souza, and thank you for listening to the Common Sense Express on the Heads Up Radio Network. Have a great afternoon.
Support of Heads Up Radio's audio stream comes from people like you. Join the thousands that make independent radio stations like Heads Up Radio available to the public and your community. Please donate today. Need a spring cleaning? Let Avalanche come to the rescue. For carpet, upholstery, general home cleaning, even window cleaning needs. Call 208-762-2227 or online at avalancheclean.com. Avalanche, fast, safe, and reliable.